people in your life that aren't quite respecting the social distancing rule at this point? I've noticed that a lot of people of, say, age 55 and up are doing a very good job. And then there are other younger people, especially the age 20s or so, that are out partying and going to beaches. And I think they're not fully understanding what we're going through. And it's understandable. This is a first-time thing for most of us, right? The last pandemic we had was the Spanish flu in 1918. So I strongly recommend getting the game of Pandemic and inviting them to join you. Pandemic is a fantastic teaching tool. What you're doing, just an overview, is you are fighting a disease collectively. You're fighting a pandemic, or actually it's actually different epidemics in this game, collectively. And so you learn about the different roles that are involved and how epidemics are fought. So I strongly recommend you giving this game a try. I'm Dr. Tina, holistic brain health practitioner at Lifelong Enerjoy and former epidemiologist. All right, if you're ready to play the game Pandemic, let me give you an overview. So first of all, we've got this board right here, and it is the world. And you see these cubes. This is sort of a setup. I've just set up the board in terms of how it starts. But these cubes represent the infectivity, or how infected a particular city is. And what we're doing is that as players, we play these different roles. We have one of 7 roles that we play. We can either be a contingency planner, an operations expert, a dispatcher, a quarantine specialist, a scientist, a researcher, or a medic. And depending on what character we have a corresponding doohickey that goes around the board and basically works to fight, to find a cure and eradicate the disease. All right? And so that we keep track of over here. So in the game, what we do is we build research stations. We trade cards. These cards are cards that we collect, and they are sort of equivalent to resources and information that we get, right? And so we trade cards in order to, as if we were building or exchanging information, and then we find cures and try to eradicate the disease. Now, there are 4 different, we start off by doing 4 different actions. We can either travel around the board, we can build research stations, or we can trade cards, or we can cure disease. Then we draw these 2 cards from this pile right here. And in this pile, as I mentioned earlier, there's like these cards that are cities. But in this card, we can also, in this pack, we'll also have a few opportunities, between 4 and 6 opportunities to get epidemics. And when we get an epidemic, what happens is that things get more infectious, and we keep track of it over here with this infection rate, right? And when things get more infectious, basically the disease spreads faster, okay? Now, let's go back to right here, Istanbul. Now, Istanbul has 3 cubes on it, and in this game, 3 cubes is as infected as it can get. What happens is if you end up drawing the Istanbul card again, then you're having an outbreak because there's a maximum of 3 cubes. So then you have to spread your cubes around everything that's connected to Istanbul. And that's how you have an outbreak, which you keep track of here, all right? So what you're doing here is that you're fighting against time. You're fighting against these cards, these epidemic cards that keep coming up. Also, at the end of everybody's turn, you have to draw a couple of more cards, and 2 or 3 or 4 more cards, depending on your infection rate, and you've got to spread the disease, so you add more of these cubes to the board to show greater infection. So this is the beginning of the game, but as the game progresses along, you're going to see more and more cubes on the board, and the more cubes you have, the bigger trouble you are at, all right? So what this game does is it's a fantastic example of what an infectious disease looks like, or a pandemic looks like, and it can really help build up that sense of anxiety that somebody might need if they're not really honoring the safe distance rule. So let's talk about the differences between the game and what's going on with this COVID-19 situation. So the differences are that one thing is that when it comes to the roles, we're a little bit limited with our roles. just a couple of years ago, we had a much larger CDC, and unfortunately, the unit that's in charge of pandemics got cut. So that makes us much more vulnerable than we would otherwise. We also, in what's going on in our current situation, is that we don't have enough resources. We don't have enough personal protective equipment. I'm sure you've heard about that. And it's because we haven't stockpiled it, because we weren't prepared for this. But we also, there's issues with the whole supply chain. And the problem is we are dependent on China for a lot of the items that we need. So this is not just a matter of like just make more or provide more or buy more. It's a supply chain issue that has multiple issues that need to be addressed. Another thing that you can play with is the infectivity. Now, the infectivity is the RO score, the ROSE score, which is only about 2. I've seen like it range between 2 and 2.5, depending on where you are, and that's how epidemiologists measure infectivity. Well, that doesn't sound very infectious, but we've got other complicated factors that make it more infectious, like the fact that the virus can stay on surfaces for up to 9 days, or that it can linger in the air as well. And so there's a lot of different variables that make this a lot more terrifying. And then it's deathly, right? So that's a whole nother component to it. Another difference between this game and the pandemic is the fact that there's in this game pandemic, there's actually several epidemics going on, when in reality there's one that really we're all fighting together. But the common point here, the common main points are that we as a world have to come together to fight this pandemic. It's the best way that we're actually going to find, a vaccine and a cure. And I believe personally that the Chinese are already well on their way. And if we listen to them, coordinate with them more, we'll probably find something faster as well. And I don't see it coming out as one cure. I see it coming as multiple things that need to address a variety of different aspects of the pathway in order to address the disease. And that is, I believe, how we best get the cure, which is a variety of different things together. That includes, the more integrative our cure strategy is, the more effective, or the more likely we'll be able to find something fast. So it's a great example of how we're all in this together. It's also, if you have people in your family that are not appreciating this social distancing, this can really help them induce the panic that they need to see how fast epidemics can grow. Another key difference is if you have a cat that wants to play and get on top of the board, that, unfortunately, is not a real-life scenario. There is no one cat that can alleviate you of all the pandemics on the board. So that's another big difference. All right? But in the meantime, enjoy the game. Enjoy teaching your family and friends about it. Help get out the word about the importance of social distancing so that we can all stay as safe and alive as possible. All right. Take care.